The great city of Valara Prime shone like a jewel in the blackness of space. Towering spires of crystal reflected the twin suns, and the air was filled with the hum of hovercrafts weaving between sky bridges. But inside the royal palace, far from the bustling streets, Princess Serenia stood by her balcony, staring at the horizon with troubled eyes. Serenia was known across the Valerian Empire for her soft, natural beauty. Delicate silver patterns on her emerald-tinted skin, eyes the color of warm sunlight. To her people, she was a symbol of grace and unity. But today, she felt like nothing more than a pawn. Her father, the High Sovereign, had called her into the council chamber that morning. His words still rang in her mind. "You will marry the human soldier, Captain Elias Varin. This union will bind our worlds in peace." Peace. That was the word they always used. But Serenia knew what it really meant: politics, power, and control. The Valerian Empire had been at war with humanity only a generation ago. The wounds were still fresh, and now they wanted her to be part of an alliance by tying her life to a human stranger. She had heard stories about humans. Some said they were fierce, quick to anger, dangerous in battle. Others claimed they were clever, unpredictable, and stubborn beyond reason. Serenia believed the first set of stories. She had no interest in finding out if the second was true. Her heart tightened at the thought of starting a family with a human. The differences in their biology, their cultures, their ways of life, it felt impossible, unthinkable. She told herself she would agree to the marriage only in name, but nothing more. The sound of footsteps pulled her from her thoughts. Her advisor, an older woman named Melis, approached. "Princess, the human delegation has arrived," Melis said softly. "Your father wishes you to greet them." Serenia inhaled slowly, putting on the calm, regal mask she had worn since childhood. "Very well," she replied, even though every step toward the grand hall felt heavier than the last. The hall was filled with tension. On one side stood the Valerian court, elegant, tall, and adorned in ceremonial robes. On the other, the human delegation, broad-shouldered, shorter, their uniforms dark and practical. At the center of the human group stood Captain Elias Varin. Serenia expected him to glare, to smirk, to carry himself like a conqueror. Instead, he stood quietly, his hands clasped behind his back, his gaze steady but not unkind. His dark hair was neatly trimmed, and there was a calm strength in his posture. The High Sovereign stepped forward to make the introductions. "My daughter, Princess Serenia," he said, his voice carrying through the chamber, "and this is Captain Elias Varin of the Terran Defense Force." Elias bowed, not with the stiff, awkward motion Serenia had expected, but with a respectful grace that surprised her. "It is an honor, Princess," he said, his voice low and even. She returned the gesture politely. "Welcome to Valara Prime." "Captain," she replied, keeping her tone neutral. The formalities continued, speeches about peace and unity filling the hall. Serenia barely listened. She kept stealing glances at Elias, trying to read him. He stood with the stillness of a soldier trained to wait for hours, yet there was no coldness in his eyes. Later, during a quiet moment in the gardens, they were left alone to speak. The gardens of Valara Prime were famous for their floating blossoms, flowers, that hovered in the air, drifting like living lanterns. Serenia walked ahead, expecting Elias to follow at a distance, but he matched her pace without crowding her. "I understand you have doubts about this arrangement," he said gently. She stopped, turning to face him. "You're very direct, Captain." "War teaches you not to waste time," he replied. "But I'm not here to force you into anything. I agreed to this alliance because I believe it might save lives." His words caught her off guard. "Most soldiers I've met only talk about victory, not peace." "Victory is temporary. Elias said, glancing at the hovering blossoms. Peace is worth fighting for. For a moment, she didn't know how to respond. The wind carried the faint scent of the flowers between them. They walked in silence for a while. Serenia noticed the way Elias scanned their surroundings. Not in suspicion, but out of habit, like someone who had learned to protect others without thinking about it. When Naatim set, they reached a stone bridge overlooking the city. Elias spoke again. "Princess, I don't expect your trust. Not yet. But I'll tell you this. Whatever happens between our peoples, I will protect you. Not because of politics, because it's the right thing to do." His tone was calm, almost casual, but there was a weight behind it. Serenia felt a strange warmth in her chest, confusion, curiosity, and something she couldn't name. She looked at him closely. He wasn't what she expected. He wasn't the arrogant human soldier from the war stories. He was something else entirely, someone who carried himself like a shield rather than a sword. As they returned to the palace, Serenia realized her careful wall of mistrust had a small hairline crack. It was barely noticeable, but it was there, and she couldn't help but wonder if this human soldier might be more dangerous to her heart than to her life. The day after their first meeting, the palace was alive with preparation. Servants hurried through the halls carrying banners, gifts, and documents for the official signing ceremony. Outside, the skies above Valara Prime shimmered with incoming ships. Delegations from across both human and Valarian territories had come to witness the new alliance. Serenia sat in her private chamber, watching the sky through a wide crystal window. Her thoughts were tangled. Elias Varan was not what she expected. He had been respectful, steady, and unexpectedly gentle in their first conversation. Still, she reminded herself, one polite meeting did not erase years of distrust. A soft knock on the door pulled her from her thoughts. "Princess," came Malus's voice, "the captain requests your presence in the courtyard. There is a matter he wishes to discuss before the ceremony." Curiosity stirred. Serenia rose, arranging her ceremonial robes before stepping into the hall. The walk to the courtyard was long, but the air outside was fresh and bright when she arrived. Elias was there, standing near a gleaming transport vehicle. His uniform pressed and his posture as straight as a drawn blade. "Princess," he greeted with a respectful nod. "I hope I'm not disturbing your morning." "You are," she replied, though her voice carried a hint of playfulness. "What is this about?" He glanced at the transport. "I thought it would be beneficial if you accompanied me to the security perimeter. It is important you see the outer layers of protection around the palace." Serenia hesitated. Valarian, royalty rarely left the inner court unless escorted by a full guard, but something in Elias's tone told her this was not an idle tour. "Very well," she said at last. The transport lifted smoothly into the air, carrying them away from the palace's golden towers. Below, the city stretched out in elegant spirals of white stone and glass, connected by glowing transit lines. "Why? Show me this," Serenia asked. Elias kept his eyes on the horizon. "Because I want you to understand something about me. I am a soldier, yes, but I am not here to rule you or command you. My duty is to keep you safe, even if that means standing against my own people, should it ever come to that." Her brow furrowed. "You would turn against your own kind. I would turn against anyone who threatens innocent lives," Elias said simply. "Species doesn't matter to me, actions do." There was no pride in his voice, no attempt to impress her, just truth. Serenia found herself studying him again, wondering what kind of soldier spoke like this. The transport descended toward the security perimeter, where rows of human and Valarian guards worked side by side. A low hum of engines filled the air as drones scanned the skies for any threat. Elias led her through the checkpoint, explaining each defense layer: motion detectors, shield barriers, mixed patrol units. As they moved, a sudden alarm cut through the calm. Sirens blared. Guards shouted orders. A bright streak shot across the sky, a small, fast-moving ship breaking past the outer watch. "Pirates!" a Valerian officer called. "They've breached the no-fly zone!" Before Serenia could react, Elias was already moving. "Get her behind cover!" he ordered, guiding her toward a reinforced wall. Blaster fire erupted overhead. The pirate ship skimmed low, dropping armed raiders into the courtyard. The guards rushed to intercept, but the attackers were fast, weaving through defensive fire. One raider broke past the line, heading straight for Serenia. She froze, her mind flashing to the war stories she had heard. As a child, Elias stepped in front of her without hesitation. His movements were precise, almost mechanical, blocking the first strike, disarming the raider with a twist, and pushing the attacker back toward the guard line. Another pirate fired from above, the bolt streaking toward them. Elias reacted instantly, pulling Serenia down and shielding her with his own body as the energy blast hit the wall behind them. The guards finally gained control of the skirmish, forcing the remaining raiders to retreat to their ship. The vessel shot back into the sky, disappearing beyond the city's shield dome. Serenia looked up at Elias, who was still crouched protectively over her. His breathing was steady, but his eyes scanned the area, making sure the danger was truly gone. You could have been hurt," she said quietly. "That's my job," he replied, helping her to her feet, "making sure you're not." The transport ride back to the palace was silent at first. Serenia's mind replayed the moment he had thrown himself between her and danger. Not because of duty to the Alliance, but because of something deeper. "You didn't hesitate," she said finally. "I never do when someone's in danger," Elias answered, "especially not someone I've sworn to protect." The rest of the day passed in a blur. The ceremony went forward, the alliance documents signed under the watchful eyes of both governments. Speeches were made, toasts exchanged, but Serenia's mind kept drifting to the courtyard. The sound of the sirens, the flash of the blaster fire, and the human soldier standing unshaken in the middle of it all. That night, standing alone in her balcony chambers, Serenia looked out at the glowing city. For the first time since hearing her father's announcement, she felt something she had not expected, a small spark of trust. Elias Varon was still a mystery, but he had kept his promise before even making it aloud. And that, she realized, might be the first step toward breaking the wall she had built around her heart. The days after the pirate attack were tense. Valara Prime's palace was placed under heavier guard. Patrols doubled. Human and Valerian soldiers worked side by side, but there was an invisible tension between them, like a taut rope that could snap at any moment. Princess Serenia kept to her duties, public appearances, council meetings, and endless formal dinners, but her thoughts often drifted to Elias. She could not forget the moment he had shielded her from blaster fire, taking the risk without a second thought. One evening, she stepped into the strategy chamber, expecting to find the Valerian generals reviewing defense plans. Instead, she found Elias alone, leaning over a holographic map. His expression was calm but focused, eyes scanning the faint red dots marking trouble zones across the city. "You work even when you are not ordered to," she said from the doorway. He looked up with a faint smile. "Habit. I like to be prepared." Serenia stepped closer. "Do you not trust our security?" "I trust them," Elias said carefully. "But sometimes loyalty is not enough. You have to be ready for betrayal, from the outside or the inside." She tilted her head. "You speak as if you have seen betrayal before." He did not answer immediately. Instead, he tapped the hologram, and the image shifted to a battlefield scarred with smoke. "During the frontier wars, I was stationed with a unit defending a neutral colony. We thought the locals were on our side, until one night half of them opened the gates to the enemy." Serenia felt a chill. And what did you do? Protected the ones who stayed loyal, Elias said simply, and made sure the traitors couldn't harm anyone again. Before she could reply, the chamber doors burst open. A Valerian guard rushed in, his face pale. "Princess! Captain! There has been an explosion in the market district. The council believes it is an attempt to disrupt the alliance." Elias was already moving. "Get the princess to safety," he ordered. "I'm coming with you," Serenia said firmly. "It's not safe." "I will not hide while my people suffer," she interrupted. "You will protect me. That is your duty, is it not?" Their eyes met, and after a long pause, Elias nodded. "Stay close." The market district was chaos when they arrived. Smoke billowed from a collapsed building, traders and shoppers running in every direction. Valerian medics moved quickly, treating the injured, while human engineers helped stabilize the remaining structures. Elias guided Serenia through the rubble-strewn streets. "Stay behind me," he reminded her as he scanned the crowd, but Serenia's attention was caught by a child, a small Valerian girl sitting on the ground, trembling, her hands covering her ears. Without thinking, Serenia broke from Elias's side and knelt beside the girl. "It's all right," Serenia said gently, taking the child's hands. "You're safe now." The girl looked up, tears streaking her emerald skin. They told me humans were monsters," she whispered, glancing fearfully at the human soldiers nearby. Serenia glanced back at Elias, who was directing evacuation efforts. "That man over there," Serenia said softly, "is a human. He saved me from people who wanted to hurt me. Not all humans are what you have been told." The child's eyes widened as she looked again at Elias, tall, steady, and calm even in the smoke and noise. Slowly, she nodded. Before Serenia could say more, a sharp sound cut through the air, metal scraping against stone. Elias's voice rang out, "Ambush! Get down!" 3 figures in dark armor emerged from the side alley, their weapons aimed at the crowd. Elias moved like lightning, pulling Serenia behind a stone pillar while signaling the guards to engage. Attackers fired, scattering civilians. Elias returned fire with precision, driving them back toward the alley. But one slipped through the chaos, heading straight for Serenia. She froze for a heartbeat, until Elias was there, blocking the attacker's path. The fight was quick but fierce, the sound of metal clashing echoing through the street. In the end, Elias forced the attacker to the ground, disarming him before the guards took over. Breathing hard, Elias turned to Serenia. "Are you hurt?" "No," she said, though her voice trembled. "But you—" "I'm fine," he cut in. "Let's get you back to safety." That night, Serenia visited the palace infirmary, where Elias was having a shallow cut on his arm treated. She stood by the doorway for a moment, watching him thank the medic before turning to leave. "You were reckless," she said when he noticed her. He raised an eyebrow. "Reckless or doing my job?" "Both," she replied. "You keep risking yourself for me without thinking." "That's what trust looks like," Elias said simply. "If you can't trust me yet, that's fine. But know this. I will stand between you and danger every time." Serenia studied him in silence. The truth was, she did trust him, at least more than she trusted anyone outside her family. She just wasn't ready to say it aloud. As she left the infirmary, she realized something important. Her fear of humans had been built on stories and distance, but standing beside Elias in real danger had shown her something no council speech could. Trust wasn't built in the safety of a palace. It was built in fire, smoke, and the split-second choices people made when everything was on the line, and Elias had chosen her. Every time. The sky over Valara Prime was a deep violet that morning, heavy clouds swirling as if the weather itself sensed trouble. Inside the palace, Princess Serenia stood at the council table beside her father, listening to tense reports from human and Valerian officers. The separatist faction, those who hated the alliance, had grown bolder. They had taken control of several outlying colonies and were calling for the complete end of peace talks. Both human and Valerian intelligence confirmed the same thing. An attack on the capital was coming. Serenia's gaze drifted to Elias, who stood at the far side of the table in full combat gear. His expression was calm, but focused, his eyes moving from speaker to speaker. Even in the heavy air of the council chamber, his presence felt steady, like a stone in a raging river. After the meeting ended, Elias approached her quietly. "Princess, I think it's too dangerous for you to stay in the city right now," Serenia frowned. "And where would you have me go? I am the Princess of Valara Prime. If I run, the people will lose hope." "I'm not suggesting you run," he said evenly. "I'm suggesting we move you to a safer location so you can continue leading without becoming a target." She hesitated. She hated the thought of hiding. But she trusted Elias's judgment, and something in his tone told her this was more than routine caution. By evening, they had left the palace in a small stealth shuttle. Their destination, a remote moon called Thales Fifth, covered in dense jungles, and far from the main trade routes. From there, Serenia could communicate with the capital securely while avoiding immediate danger. The shuttle landed in a quiet clearing, its engines humming low before shutting down completely. The air was warm and heavy with the scent of wet earth. Towering trees with silver leaves stretched toward the sky, their branches swaying in the wind. "This is where we'll stay until we get the all clear," Elias said, stepping out first, to scan the area. Serenia followed, her ceremonial robes replaced with light travel clothes better suited for the wild terrain. She had never been this far from the comforts of the palace before. They made camp near a slow-moving river, setting up a small energy barrier to keep predators away. Elias built a fire, not for heat, but for light and cooking. As the flames flickered, Serenia watched him work. His movements were precise but unhurried, every action measured. She realized that even here, far from the capital, he was still protecting her with every decision. The next morning, rain swept across the jungle. They took shelter under a broad-leafed canopy, watching the river swell with the downpour. "You seem comfortable here?" Serenia said, noticing how easily Elias adapted to the environment. "I've spent a lot of time in places like this," he replied. "You learn to read the land. Listen to it." "Read the land?" she asked, curious. Elias pointed to a group of birds suddenly flying low over the water. "That means a predator's moving through the trees on the far side. Nothing to worry about if we stay here." Serenia glanced toward the distant tree line, surprised. "And how do you know that?" He shrugged slightly. "Experience. Survival isn't just about weapons, it's about paying attention." They spent the next days learning from each other. Elias taught her how to filter water using simple tools, how to set up a camp that left no trace for enemies to follow. In return, Serenia showed him how to navigate using the subtle shifts of Valerian constellations, even in unfamiliar skies. The more time they spent together, the more the walls between them began to crumble. They laughed at small mistakes, Elias slipping in the mud, Serenia nearly dropping a cooking pot into the river. And at night, when the fire burned low, they would speak of their worlds, not as rivals, but as people. On the fourth night, the bee. Quiet was broken by the distant hum of engines. Elias was on his feet instantly, scanning the horizon through his visor. "That's not one of ours," he said. "Stay here." But Serenia stepped forward. "If it's trouble, I'm not letting. You face it alone." They moved together to higher ground, where the thick trees gave way to a ridge. From there, they saw it, a small craft hovering above the treetops, its lights cutting through the mist. Elias frowned. Recon ship. Separatist markings. Before they could retreat, a beam of light swept across the ridge, locking on to their position. A sharp crack split the air as a warning shot hit a tree nearby. "Move!" Elias grabbed Serenya's arm, pulling her back toward the camp as blaster fire lit up the jungle. They weaved between trees, the sound of pursuing engines growing louder. Elias fired back in controlled bursts, aiming to slow their attackers rather than destroy them. But the Separatists were persistent. Finally, Elias turned sharply toward the river. "We'll use the current to mask our trail. Stay close to me." They plunged into the water, letting the flow carry them downstream while staying low to avoid being seen. The cold bit at Serenya's skin, but she kept her eyes on Elias, trusting his every movement. After what felt like hours, they emerged onto a rocky bank far from the camp. The jungle here was quieter, the only sound the rush of the river. Elias scanned the area before finally lowering his weapon. "We lost them." Serenya caught her breath, her heart still pounding. "You saved me. Again. That's what I'm here for," he said simply. But there was something in his eyes, a flicker of relief, and maybe something more. They set up a smaller hidden camp that night, eating a simple meal under the stars. Serenya looked at the man sitting across from her, his uniform damp, his hair still wet from the river. "I used to think humans were reckless," she admitted quietly. "But you're careful in ways I didn't expect. You think ahead." Elias met her gaze. "And I used to think Valerian royalty would be untouchable, above it all. But you came with me into danger without hesitation. That's not what I expected either." The fire crackled softly between them, casting warm light across their faces. The storm that had brought them here was still raging far away in the capital. But for this moment, in this hidden corner of the galaxy, they were simply two people, surviving together. And somewhere deep inside, Serenya realized she no longer saw Elias only as her protector. She saw him as her partner, whether the alliance demanded it or not. It was early morning when the first signs came, a distant tremor beneath the ground, so faint that Serenya thought it was her imagination. But Elias noticed it immediately. He froze in place, his hand resting lightly on the grip of his weapon, eyes scanning the canopy. "That's a heavy engine," he said quietly. "And it's coming fast." Within minutes, the sound became clear, a deep, rhythmic thrum of large ships breaking through the atmosphere. The Separatists had found them. Elias moved quickly. "We have to get back to the shuttle and signal the fleet for extraction. If we stay here, we'll be surrounded." Serenya followed without argument, her travel cloak brushing against wet leaves as they moved through the undergrowth. But before they could reach the ridge, the sharp roar of blaster fire split the air. A tree exploded in front of them, showering them with splinters. "They're already here!" Elias shouted. Separatist soldiers poured from the tree line, their armor marked with the jagged symbol of their faction. Elias took cover behind a boulder, returning fire in controlled bursts. "Stay low, princess," he called, his voice firm but steady. Serenya crouched beside him, her heart pounding. She had been in danger before, but this was different. The air was thick with heat and smoke, and the sound of weapons clashing made the jungle feel like it was closing in around them. They fought their way uphill, but the enemy pressed them hard. A sudden explosion sent a shock wave through the ground, throwing Serenya off balance. She would have fallen if Elias hadn't caught her, pulling her behind. "Cover, you all right?" he asked quickly. She nodded, though her breath came fast. "We can't outrun them like this." Elias glanced toward the ridge, where the faint shape of the shuttle's landing site could just be seen through the trees. "We don't need to outrun them. We just need to hold long enough for help to arrive." He activated his wrist communicator, sending out a coded distress signal. Static crackled in response. Then a human voice broke through, faint but clear. "This is the Terran patrol ship Valor. Hold your position, Captain. Extraction inbound." Relief flickered in Serenya's chest, but it was short-lived. The Separatists redoubled their attack, firing in waves. One bolt hit the rock near Elias, sending shards into his shoulder. He gritted his teeth but didn't stop moving. "I'm fine," he muttered, even as blood seeped through the tear in his uniform. "You're injured," Serenia said urgently. "It's nothing," Elias replied. "I'm not leaving you here." Minutes felt like hours. The fight dragged on, the noise and heat pressing in from all sides. Serenia could see the strain in Elias's movements now, his left arm slower, his breath heavier, but he never once let his guard drop. Then, without warning, a separatist broke through the trees behind them, weapon raised. Serenia saw it before Elias did. Instinct overrode fear. She grabbed a fallen branch and swung with all her strength, knocking the attacker off balance. Elias turned in time to finish the fight, disarming the separatist and forcing him back into the jungle. He gave Serenia a quick look, part surprise, part pride. "Nice move, princess," she allowed herself a small, breathless smile. "You've been teaching me well." At last, the distant roar of engines filled the air, not enemy ships this time, but the deep, steady hum of a Terran dropship. Through the breaks in the canopy, Serenia caught glimpses of its sleek silver hull descending toward the ridge. "We're almost there," Elias said, his voice tight with effort. They pushed forward together, covering each other's movements as they climbed the last stretch of rocky slope. But just as the dropship came into full view, a sharp blast rang out. Serenia turned and saw Elias stumble. He dropped to one knee, a scorch mark across the side of his armor. Without thinking, she rushed to him, pulling his arm over her shoulders. "We're finishing this together," she said firmly. His jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. The final meters to the dropship felt endless. The separatists were still firing from below, but the Terran soldiers aboard the ship laid down covering fire, forcing them to retreat. At last, Serenia and Elias crossed the ramp into the safety of the dropship's hold. The ramp sealed, and the ship lifted off, the jungle falling away beneath them. Elias slumped against the wall, breathing hard. The medic rushed over, but Serenia stayed close, her hand steadying his shoulder. "You could have been killed," she said softly. He gave a faint, tired smile. "Wouldn't be the first time." "That's not funny," she replied, her voice catching slightly. His eyes met hers then, calm, serious, unshaken. "I told you before, princess. I'll stand between you and danger every time. That's not going to change." For a long moment, Serenia didn't look away. The ship's engines roared around them, but all she could hear was the echo of his words. She had once sworn never to let herself care for a human. But somewhere between the smoke-filled streets, the jungle nights, and the battles they had fought side by side, her fear had turned into something else. She wasn't ready to name it yet. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She didn't want to imagine a future without him in it. The dropship's engines hummed steadily as it cut through the clouds toward Valara Prime. Serenia sat beside Elias in the medical bay, watching as the medic tended to his injuries. His armor lay on the floor, scorched and battered, and his undershirt was torn at the shoulder where the blaster shot had grazed him. "You were lucky," the medic said, securing the bandage. "Half a second slower and it would have been worse." Elias gave a small nod. "I'll take luck when I can get it." Serenia didn't speak. She kept her hands folded in her lap, but her eyes never left him. The jungle fight replayed in her mind, the moment he stumbled, the way he had refused to let go of her even when hurt. When the dropship broke through the clouds, the city came into view. Valara Prime shone in the morning light, its towers glinting like crystal spears. For Serenia, it had never looked so much like home. For the first time, she wanted to see it not just as her duty, but as the place where her new path would begin. The landing pad was surrounded by both human and Valerian guards, their faces tight with relief. Her father, the High Sovereign, stood, waiting at the front, his ceremonial robes flowing in the wind. "Serenia," he said as she stepped down the ramp. We feared the worst. "I am safe," she replied. Then she stepped aside, revealing Elias behind her. "Because of him." The High Sovereign's gaze shifted to the human soldier. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then the ruler inclined his head. "You have my gratitude, Captain Varen. You have proven your loyalty to this alliance and to my daughter." "It's my duty," Elias said simply, but Serenia knew it was more than that. The palace halls buzzed with activity. News of the separatist attack had spread quickly, and both human and Valerian representatives were summoned for an emergency council meeting. Serenia attended, sitting beside her father, while Elias stood at his usual post behind her. The debate was fierce. Some Valerian leaders argued that the alliance had only brought danger. Some human officials claimed the Valerian security forces had failed. Voices rose, tempers flared, and the fragile peace trembled on the edge of breaking. Finally, Serenia rose to her feet. The room fell silent. "Enough," she said, her voice clear and steady. "I was against this alliance once. I believed our peoples could never truly trust each other. But I was wrong." She let her gaze travel across the room, meeting the eyes of every delegate. When the separatists attacked, Captain Elias Varen fought not as a human protecting a Valerian princess, but as one person protecting another. He did not care about species, politics, or history. He cared only that I lived, and I have seen the same from Valerians who defended human citizens in the streets. That is what this alliance means. There was a long, heavy pause. Then, slowly, heads began to nod. The argument softened, and plans were made to strengthen cooperation between the two sides. That night, the palace was quiet again. The danger had passed for now, but the memories still lingered. Serenia stood on her balcony looking out over the glowing city. Elias approached, his footsteps steady on the marble floor. "You spoke well today," he said. She smiled faintly. "You inspired the words." For a moment, they stood in silence, the breeze carrying the faint scent of the gardens below. Then Serenia turned to face him fully. "I used to fear the idea of a future with a human," she admitted. "I thought it would mean giving up a part of myself, but now I see that it means gaining something I never knew I wanted." Elias met her gaze, his expression unreadable at first. Then a small, warm smile touched his lips. "Whatever the future brings, Princess, I'll be there. That's a promise I won't break." "I know," she said softly. Weeks passed. The separatist threat weakened as both human and Valerian forces worked together to dismantle their strongholds. Trade routes reopened, and for the first time in decades there was a sense of real hope between the two civilizations. The palace hosted a grand celebration to honor the renewal of the alliance. Delegates, soldiers, and citizens from both worlds filled the great hall. Serenia wore a gown of deep emerald that shimmered under the lights, her silver patterns glinting like starlight. Elias stood beside her in his dress uniform, the Medal of Honor recently awarded to him gleaming on his chest. When the music began, Serenia extended her hand toward him. "Dance with me, Captain." Elias hesitated for only a moment before taking her hand. They moved together across the floor, not as strangers forced into a political union, but as partners who had walked through fire and returned stronger. Around them, the hall buzzed with laughter and music. But for Serenia, the rest of the world faded. She could feel the steady strength in his hand, the calm in his movements. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine the years ahead. Not with fear, but with quiet certainty. Later that night, after the celebration ended, Serenia and Elias walked alone through the palace gardens. The floating blossoms glowed softly around them, drifting in the air like tiny moons. "When I first met you," Serenia said, I promised myself I would never let this alliance be anything more than duty. Now, I don't want it to be just duty. Elias looked at her for a long moment. And what do you want it to be? She smiled. A choice. My choice. The wind stirred the blossoms, carrying their petals between them. In that quiet moment, under the twin moons of Valara Prime, Serenia knew the truth. She had chosen her path, not because her father demanded it, not because politics required it, but because she wanted to walk it with him, and for Elias, who had sworn to protect her long before either of them trusted each other, that choice was the only victory that mattered. The storms had passed. The battles had been fought, and the future, human and Valerian, was theirs to build.